everybody, this is Jackie Luqman,
And I'm Abdul Shahid Luqman.
and welcome to another episode of Live and Coffee Current Events and Politics in Luqman Nation.
The most dangerous show on social media.
So, um, there's a lot going on, and goodness gracious, I don't. It's hard to keep up with everything,
Well, this
but
is actually a continuation from an earlier broadcast that we had called As We See It, the
mm-hmm,
segment As We See It.
mm-hmm,
We didn't really, we had some technical difficulties. And because we felt that what we were discussing was very interesting to us, and we hope it would be interesting to you, that we wanted to share our points of view on climate, the climate catastrophe, as some
mm-hmm,
might call it,
mm-hmm,
and everything, and all the issues that's surrounding that. Because one of the things that we must say is the fact that Jackie and I, we try to delve beneath the surface. We know a lot of people are talking about climate change, and rightfully so. But at the same time, you hear the same talking points. We understand the causes, we understand all those things, and the ineptitude of the government, or the lack of government response to this.
mm-hmm.
So Jackie and I, we try to dig beneath the surface, and so we want to give you guys what we feel is the bigger picture of what's happening, because everything's connected.
Mm-hmm.
We talk about intersectionality.
Yeah.
Everything is connected. So we hope that sharing this our view, as we call the Luqman theorems, with you, that you will find it interesting, and we hope that this will be a conversational piece even amongst your own circle. So again, we thank you for joining us. We would like for you to take the time to share this stream, invite your friends, have a watch party. Hey,
Yeah.
bring everybody on. Let's have a party. Let's talk about these issues that concern us all. So
Yeah.
let me toss the ball.
All right, the ball has been tossed. And for some reason, it seems like we've had a disconnection with Facebook. I don't know. Oh, we're back. Okay. If we have any playback issues, if we have any streaming issues, y'all, the playback should be smooth. You know how that works. We've moved our studio around, so we're checking out. We've got some new
Mm-hmm.
equipment. So we are, smoothing out the kinks in our new studio. In about a week, the background will be completely different. We got a lot going on. So, all right, let's get into discussion
Yes.
about climate catastrophe and why this is so important. We were talking earlier about the concept of justice
Mm.
in the discussion of climate catastrophe. I know that seems real weird, but as you can hear, our intern, our four-legged fur intern Brewski in the background, he'll make an appearance soon enough. Um, yeah, here he comes. So when we think of the concepts of justice in this climate catastrophe that we're facing, we were talking earlier about the idea that what if the climate catastrophe that we human beings are facing is really the universe or the planet meting out the purest form of blind justice that could possibly exist. And we were talking earlier about how it is so hard for human beings to wrap our minds around that concept because we don't like the idea that we're not at the top of the food chain. Like we don't like the idea that we are not in control of anything. Um, we can't even admit that climate catastrophe and that climate change has is caused by human actions. So of course we're not going to come to the conclusion that um, what we're facing as far as this climate catastrophe in whatever form it takes, because we don't even quite know yet. It's it's not only the result of climate change is not only our fault, but what we get, how we are going to survive or not, that's on us too. But because we like we said earlier, we're so used to being at the top of the food chain, we cannot envision a planet that doesn't exist without us at the center of whatever this planet is. And that's really, it's ahistorical, it's outside of every spiritual narrative that exists. Human beings aren't at the center of the story of the planet, of this planet and the universe. We're not. That's a very recent development. You were saying earlier.
Well, we'll get into these spiritual aspects of what tying this all together, because whether you want to believe, whether we want to accept it or not, religion has had a say in this, and and I think that it's important to check out the viewpoints of some of the religious doctrine concerning our responsibility to the planet, our responsibility to each other. But I want to put in context too, because see, we the narrative has that we have basically narrowed the climate disaster to the burnings of fossil fuels. But what we're not talking about is also the release of radioactivity, and not just recently. I mean, throughout the decades. I mean, the United States and the Soviet Union were in the habit of detonating nuclear bombs in the atmosphere. So much so that billions of radioactive particles were in the atmosphere and affected everything on the planet. We know about the nuclear testing in the oceans, and the fact that there are uninhabitable islands that is due to the fact of U.S. and nuclear testing, Chinese nuclear testing on the oceans. We know about the Bravo test, which basically affected a large population of Pacific Islanders in certain parts, and that they received no treatment, that they received little attention, that they were really left to endure this violent assault on not only their country or their land, but also on their persons, and so we bring this up to say that it's not just the burning of fossil fuels that has caused problems. I mean, we had increased cancer risks all around the world because of the proliferation of nuclear tests. These nuclear tests in the atmosphere were stopped by the then Soviet Union, the United States, only due because they knew the damage they were causing in the atmosphere, and so they banned the testing of nuclear weapons. It's not out of the kindness of their heart. They realized that they were destroying.
Right, they're literally killing people.
They're literally killing people, and they're destroying the atmosphere. So that's why they did that. They stopped underground ocean testing because they realized they were doing damage. So these governments aren't doing this out of the kindness of their heart. But we connected this also to what Jackie and I have called the Eurocentric viewpoint. That really, now when we say Eurocentric viewpoint, let us be clear. Let us put this in proper context. We're not saying that European people have always been this way. But what we are saying that within the last 600 years, since the rise of white supremacy, which is about 600 years old.
Yeah.
So about the rise of white supremacy, and when the Europeans started to dominate other indigenous people around the planet, in order to justify their domination, there was this corruption in the worldview of Europeans, which basically was built upon domination and control.
Right.
So this domination and control, which is the root cause of not only white supremacy, but also the modern Eurocentric view of Europe's place in the world. More importantly, the colonialist place in the world, the colonial powers place in the world, and everybody else's place.
Right.
So when we look at white supremacy and the Eurocentric viewpoint, we see the corruption of the rise of this corruption of Europe's place in the world, and Europe's decision or Europe's decision on where everybody else is.
Right, which is beneath them, or after.
Right,
Europe.
and that has been, and this is basically the definition of racism. Racism is born out of this. In order, and so we can't ignore we can't ignore what we're experiencing now without connecting it to history. And on Look My Nation, we always say that history is important because everything has historical roots. What happened is that white supremacy and this corrupt Eurocentric worldview has driven us to the point now where we are facing our own extinction.
Right.
So we're talking about white supremacy, the corrupt Eurocentric worldview, along with this unholy economic system called capitalism. Mm-hmm. So we combine all this together, and we had said this on one of our recent shows, Jackie, that when you combine all of this together and you look at what is happening around the planet, it has literally turned the world into hell.
Yeah.
We don't have to look at Dante's Inferno. Dante's Inferno is right now. 70% of the fires that's burning right now on the planet is in Africa. Mm. We have the Canary Islands that is on fire. The Amazon is on fire. Uh-huh. We know that there's fires in Greenland and in Alaska, even in Siberia.
In Indonesia.
And Indonesia. So we don't have to go back to Dante's Inferno. Dante's Inferno is now.
And let's be clear about something. The reason these fires are spreading out of control, is because of climate change, the warmer atmosphere, the drier areas, less moisture, and less rainy, shorter rainy seasons in areas that are used to having rainy seasons or no rainy seasons at all. So entire regions are pretty much a tinderbox. So even if a fire is set accidentally, or if a normal fire is set, then it just quickly gets out of control. The reason these fires are getting out of control the way they are is because of climate change. But let's be real clear. A lot of these fires are being set by people who want to drive out the indigenous people in those areas, the people original to those areas, because they want that land and they want to take that land and mine it for gold and other precious minerals. They want to drill for oil. They want to put a farm, some type of industrial something. And it's not just people eating meat. This is we understand that factory farming is a problem. But the reason some of the farmers, the industrial farmers, set some of the fires in the Amazon was to farm soy. They didn't set those fires because they everybody wanted all that land for cattle ranching. It's real quick to blame meat eaters for that whole problem. But what we're talking about. We're not talking about vegan versus omnivores. We're not talking about, people who drive older model cars versus people who drive electric cars. No, these things are not done by individual people and their individual choices. These fires, some of these fires, many of them were set by people who were employed and dispatched by the multinational corporations who want that land from those people who are occupying it right now. They are willing to commit genocide to make that money. That's capitalism. That's not you and me having a stake. Because if we're just going to talk about meat consumption, the United States, which is one of the largest meat consumers in the world, maybe second to China, we don't get our meat from Brazil. We get less than 1% of the. Okay, so let's make that clear. So, what we're talking about is a whole. I think this is a good what, like we were saying earlier, like a whole ecosystem of greed that is propped up by white supremacy and capitalism. You understand? I mean, 600 years ago, when the idea that Europeans had, we can conquer the rest of the lands in the hemispheres, and we can use the papal bull as justification for doing it. Before that happened, people were largely left alone, with the exception of whatever regional conflicts people had. You didn't have a whole lot of navigating the seas for conquest. But white supremacy comes on the scene, and Europeans decide, no, we own everything. We want everything, and we're going to take everything. And we're going to use whatever means we can, whatever excuse we can come up with to dominate and take from whoever we find whatever it is that they have that we want. And that ideology has lasted up to this point, and it's literally killing us. It's killing us all.
Yeah, and I think that we need to again put it in historical context. Like I stated earlier, we're not saying that the Europeans have always had this worldview. We do know that Europeans, just like everybody else, were in constant struggle for. This is just not a uniquely European thing. You can go around the world and people were always in conflict, over land and resources and those type of things. What made the difference here is that those conflicts were mainly confined to where these people were.
Right.
So if the Africans tribe was going against each other with land and resources, it didn't spill out of Africa. Then the Native American tribes, it didn't spill out of North America or those continents over here. The Chinese, it didn't spill out over there. What was unique in human history is that the European struggle for resources and land and all those things, which was against European. What was unique in history is that the Europeans, their conflict spilled outside of their borders, and when they started to come in contact with other people, then another thing came along, is the fact that, well, now it united Europe. It united, let's say, when I say Europe, I'm talking about united the powers of Europe, or maybe, the European powers at that time. It united them in the fact of, now they still fought each other over resources and land, even in the New World.
Right.
But what they were united in was the belief in the inferiority of the people that they came in contact with.
Right.
So they were united in that. So it didn't matter if it was Spain, if Portugal, Britain, France. They were all, even though they had their own conflicts on who would control who and what, and even in the so-called New World, one of the things they were all united in is that the Native Americans aren't as equal to us, the Africans aren't as equal to us. So they all participated in not only the near genocide and the genocide of some of those people, of some of our people, the enslavement of Africans and the oppression. So so wherever these European powers went, all they did was bring death and destruction, dominance and control, and they used their institutions to legitimize it. You talked about the papal bull and all this stuff. So we get, and so they use their institution to legitimize their corrupt worldview. And this was alien to indigenous people. I mean, we remember how appalled the Native Americans were when Europeans would kill hundreds of buffaloes and just eat a steak out of it. They couldn't believe people who would operate like that.
Right.
So same way in Africa. Africans were blamed for selling each other for the slave trade, but then the African worldview of slavery was different from the European view of world slavery. Nobody thought that Europeans meant that we would own you forever.
Right. Your offspring, your offspring's offspring.
I mean, this was just a foreign concept. So when we talk about to our present day and time on what's happening with the climate change, we still see the belief of this corrupt Eurocentric worldview that states that dominate and control. Now the thing of it is that now the consequences are too great now. Now the consequences are too great. Now it's the fact that now the as the old saying go, the chickens are coming home to roost. Right. So now you got 150-degree temperatures in France. You can't escape that. And see, one of the things that this corrupt Eurocentric view has done was it has convinced Europeans that they're not connected to other. They're not part of this life connection. That they're somehow separate. That they're somehow separate from all of the connections or the connections that unite us all. Not only in our humanity, but even in the very resources that we all depend on for survival. That somehow that they're not connected to this. And so what's happening is that after a while, it's starting. After a while, the lesson is coming home that yes, you are. You're part of this whole life cycle. So so climate change is affecting you too. And so now it's like, okay, now we got to do something about it.
Right.
Right. Even though climate change was known, and people say about Exxon, and the big oil companies hiding this data in the 70s. Well, let's look at this. Scientists warned us about climate change in the early 1900s.
In the early 1900s.
There was an article that was written in a British newspaper that was warning residents about all of the chimney fires and using so much coal that it was going to adversely affect the atmosphere. This article was written in the early 1900s.
Wow.
So scientists was warning humanity then that fossil fuels was a danger in the way that it was being used. So we didn't have to wait till what Exxon and the big oil companies done was they just confirmed that data, and they decided to hide it. But scientists have been warning humanity about the adverse effects of this overuse of fossil fuels in the 1900s, which was at the rise of the Industrial Revolution.
Wow. And since you brought up the rise of the Industrial Revolution, if we want to know where a lot of our environmental laws came from, where do you think they came from? The Industrial Revolution. And then when the industries came to towns and they would just dump, the tanneries, the food processing. We're not even talking about food processing on a scale that exists today. We're just talking about just regular a meat packing plant, textile mills, because it wasn't just food. Y'all need to get off of this, meat eaters versus vegans kind of stuff. Textile mills, the clothes people wore when people stopped sewing their own clothes, and they started making clothes in factories. These factories would take their waste products, whether it was material or whether it was chemicals, and just dump them in the river, in the nearest waterway, or they just dump stuff on the ground, and then the water started being polluted. The air was being polluted by the smoke from the industry, from the factories, from the smokestacks, and then the soil was being poisoned. And guess what? People started dying. People started getting sick and dying. And then politicians realized, you know what? We can't let y'all do that. Once the science and the doctors and the medical professionals said, well, the reason people keep getting typhoid is because the water is filthy. So stop putting filth in the water. So then regulations had to come along and this idea that capitalists will automatically do what's right has never been true. They have always had to be made to do what is right by people who are not them, who they're not going to make any money off of. So the industry giants had to be made by laws to stop polluting the environment, stop dumping their waste chemicals in the water. And so that's where environmental regulations came from. Those things had to be fought for.
Well, yeah, and I think you bring up a very interesting point. We had a government, we had a proactive government that took. It wasn't perfect, but we had a proactive government that said, "Hey, look, we need to rein these people in." So, I mean, it was Richard Nixon who came up with the EPA under his administration. I mean, it was Republican. The FDA and all these all came as a result of a government that was like, wait a minute. That we have to. There was still a belief in this country, even amongst politicians, that we can't allow business to just run amok or run just run. So, but that philosophy or that type of government doesn't exist today. The government that we have now is like less regulations. This is really something. If you really look at it, this is really something new in American politics. Prior to, I say maybe after Nixon is when this started. This deregulation started coming, and it really sped up with Reagan. Yeah. But the thing of it is that prior to that, there wasn't this rush to deregulate on business.
Not everything. Not everything. Now we got plenty of criticism for Richard Nixon. It's not like we're sitting here saying Richard Nixon was a good guy. We're talking about a specific set of policies that, look, we credit politicians for doing what's right when they do what's right. And we criticize them when they absolutely get it wrong. We'll criticize Richard Nixon for some other stuff because his black capitalism bull Yeah, that's a whole nother interview. I'm waiting for the Real News to drop that interview with Mercer Baradaran, because it was just great what he brought out about the connection between Richard Nixon and black capitalism. That's a whole nother show, y'all. That's great.
Now, the thing of it is, so laying that groundwork on that this climate catastrophe is, first of all, is not new. We've established the fact that that since the Industrial Revolution, scientists have been warning about the adverse effects from the overuse of fossil fuels. So this is not new. Come in the 70s, when the oil companies did their research, they found out, well, what the scientists were screaming about 100 years ago. We find it to be true. But but see, the thing of it is that as business goes, and as capitalism goes, and we're not just going to talk about capitalism, because we're going to bring up this thing about what happened in Russia too. But again, well, we'll get to that. But as business goes, and as it goes, is that it has to be profit over everything. So what happens is that Exxon, looking at, oh wow, we're going to, yes, our what we're doing is going to alter the life on this planet in years to come. And what they were doing, and there's an article that is out in the Guardian. I don't know if we posted it or not. But there's an article, no, Los Angeles Times. There's an article that states that during the time that that big oil knew about this, they were quietly strengthening their assets. Now, what we mean by assets, they were already designing stronger oil rigs because they knew of the rise of the sea level. They were already strengthening their infrastructure quietly in the 70s because they knew 30 years from now what we'd be facing. What we're looking at now is the result of what happened 30 years ago. So the climate that we have now is the result of 30 years ago. So let's look at that. This isn't something that just happened in the 90s or whatever. We are experiencing we are suffering the consequences of actions that was done 30 years ago. This is how long it took. This is what it takes to catch up with us.
Oh my gosh.
So now what we're doing now, we won't experience that until another 30 years if we're still here. So this is how climate. This is the climate timeline. So we are experiencing the results of what happened 30 years ago, and this is the climate timeline. So they were quietly strengthening their assets. Again, the unholy economic system of capitalism, which is an unholy child of white supremacy and the Eurocentric worldview. Because you can't come up with a system like capitalism when you have a worldview that looks at life as interconnected.
Right. I mean, that's a great point, because capitalism exists for a few to profit off of the underpaid labor of the many. That's what capitalism is. Not a system in which everyone benefits equally. That's not how capitalism is designed to work. That's not how it's built. That's socialism, by the way. Or if you want, or it could be communism. But capitalism does not exist to give everyone an equal opportunity to benefit from profit. That's not. So you've got people who understand that is what the system is, and trust me, capitalists, these CEOs and these mega corporate members of boards of trustees, they are under no illusions whatsoever about how capitalism works.
And you're right about not under any illusion, because again, we just brought up about how the oil industry were quietly strengthening their infrastructure. So they accepted they hid the results, but they accepted it.
Exactly. And they not only accepted it, but they prepared for a future that they knew
was coming.
They were contributing to, that would decimate much of the population and would create conditions that a lot of people couldn't even live under. But that their ability to continue to exploit what was left would continue.
You know what it reminds me of?
What?
It reminds me of what's the movie, the Umbrella Corporation.
Oh, Resident Evil.
I never
Oh yeah.
I never understood. I never understood, and I always ask you this. I never understood after they done destroyed the world and turned everybody into flesh-eating zombies. Why are they still having? Why are they still having business meetings?
That's just
You know, I mean, I
Yep.
never understood that.
Yep.
I mean, we're watching a Residential Evil, one of the franchise movies, and they're having a business meeting. Who?
Yeah, they had a stakeholder meeting.
Right, a stakeholder meeting.
98% of the world was zombies.
Right, and uninhabitable, you know, and stuff. And it's like, what are you meeting over? You know what I mean? Who? In fact, and I want to know this: who is paying you?
Right.
And then if you get paid, where are you spending it?
Exactly.
You know, so, but again, this idea of big business that profits over everything, the world and people and species be damned, because our bottom line outweighs everything else. And man, I'm glad I bought that Resident Evil, because I never understood that.
I never. But you know
Why
what?
do they have a CEO? This CEO, and you know, would you want to be a CEO of a corporation in that scenario? Like, come on.
But when you look at it, that now that you brought that up, I mean, the movies got really ridiculous. We're not talking about the quality of the movies, because after the first maybe two, then the franchise just was just a waste of time. But it is interesting that you brought that idea up, because now you can look at Resident Evil as a commentary on the lengths capitalism will go to continue to make profit. Tell me we're not there. We might not be a bunch of flesh-eating zombies, but pretty soon.
But we're zombies nonetheless.
We are zombies.
We're zombies nonetheless.
You're right.
We might not be flesh-eating. We might not be the Walking Dead type zombies. But when we allow a government in a so-called free country to operate like we're doing, and we don't do anything, we are zombies. Yeah.
Oh.
Yep. Going to work every day.
That's so good. That's so good right now.
Driving to work every day.
Ooh, that's so good right now.
We are zombies.
That's so good right now.
Yep.
That's like dessert.
Yep, we are. We're zombies.
I just love it when you say stuff.
I tried. Yep.
We're gonna have to wrap this up.
Anyway. but our last point before we do wrap it up. So Jackie and I, one of the main points that we wanted to, after we laid this out, Jackie and I talked about, would it be a bad thing that the human species become extinct? Now I know a lot of you say, "Oh, why? That's a horrible thing to say." What's it? Well, hear me out.
Die?
Now, the Earth isn't dying. Now, let me put this clear: we are not killing the Earth. What we're doing is killing ourselves. Now, why would I say that? Just recently, Al Jazeera did a piece where they went to Chernobyl, and they found out that all of that radiation. Now, Chernobyl was the worst radioactive disaster in human history. But they went back to Chernobyl and found out that this radiation did not kill the plants.
What?
It didn't kill the plants. There's an article that we shared that they found out that the radiation did not kill the plants. You know why? Because the plants adapted to the radiation. So the plants were able to protect themselves from all that radioactivity. They're there, green as ever, thriving. So we're not killing the Earth. The Earth, trust me, the Earth can withstand what we do. It's us it's us who we are killing. It's other species that we are killing. And so Jackie and I talked about, we said, well, look, would it be a bad thing? And so we started talking about the religious context in this. And I told Jackie, I said, you know, as human beings, our arrogance is the fact that we feel that somehow we're needed. We're needed. The universe would be an awful quiet place without us. Well, let me tell you something. There is a verse in the Quran where the question is asked, does man understand that there was a time when he wasn't a thing worth mentioning?
Wow.
Now, if you have a problem with me quoting from the Quran, let's go to the Bible. When Job,
Mm-hmm.
when God had this conversation with Job and questioned Job and said, "Where were you when I did this?
Oh,
Where were you when I laid the
yes.
foundations of the heaven?
Mm.
What were you doing when I did this and I did that? You know, where were you? You know, you weren't around. And yet all these things existed.
Uh-huh.
And so then you come along, and guess what? It's not that I put you above everything, but you were just one of many things I've created.
Yeah.
So you can go to the Bible if you follow that. You can go to the Quran, but they all say the same thing, that you're not that important, really. And so the thing of it is, Jackie and I was talking about is the universe. The universe, first of all, is rooted in justice, and the universe will recalibrate itself. Mm-hmm. This recalibration will happen even with us here or not. There has been five major extinctions on this planet. Mm-hmm. And I imagine all of them in their own way thought that they were important. The Tyrannosaurus Rex thought he was important.
I'm pretty sure T-Rex thought he was pretty damn important. Yeah, I thought they were all important.
Mm-hmm. And so what makes you think that the universe will stop operating the way that it's always operated? Because we're here.
Right. Yeah, because
us big brain primates are here. Us big brain hairless primates are here. And so somehow the universe is going to operate differently. It's not. And so what happens is that the universe will recalibrate itself. And if it means that we got to go, well, guess what? We got to go. That is justice in its blindest sense. Because see, what it is that when we talk about justice, and we talk about true justice, true justice shows no favoritism. True justice has no biases. True justice will operate no matter, and the axe will fall wherever it falls, and it doesn't depend on who, what, when, or how. We are only operating, and when I say we, as human species, we're paying attention to this now because it affects us.
Right.
What we don't talk about is the species that of the many species that have went extinct since we've been here. And let's look more recently, the extinction of species that happen almost on a daily basis.
Right. That we are perpetrating right now. And let's be clear about the responsibility part of this, right? Because we're not just talking about people who are actively contributing to the destruction of the ecosystem. We're not just talking about the people who are actually setting the fires in the Amazon and in Indonesia and in the Congo and on the Canary Islands. We're not just talking about the heads of the corporations, the people who are fracking and drilling, and no, we're not just talking about them. We're talking about all y'all folks who didn't pay any attention to all of the frontline community people, the poor Black people, the poor Latinos, the poor indigenous people, not only in the United States, but around the world. When we were talking about a BBC special we saw, I think it was 3 years ago, where I think it may have been Exxon, but it was definitely an oil company that had set up a rig and a refinery in an African country. Can't remember the name of the country, but the oil company polluted the waterways so much that the entire region is dead.
That was Nigeria.
Thank you. It was in the thank you, in the Niger Delta. Yeah. One of the ecologically richest regions in Africa. An oil company, several oil companies destroyed it. Not just through oil spills and just didn't clean up the oil spill. We're talking about they killed almost all the vegetation, almost all the life in the waterways. The people can't fish. That was how they made their living.
And the trees, and if you look at the trees are just dead.
Right.
I mean, it's literally an apocalyptic landscape.
And it was this way 10 years ago. It was this way a decade ago. But because it was happening to those people over in Africa, nobody cared. Cancer Alley, Here in the United States, there's more than one cancer alley. There's a cancer alley in New Jersey. There's a cancer alley in West Virginia. There's a cancer alley. Heck, there's a cancer alley developing right here in Washington, D.C. Anywhere where there are poor neighborhoods where corporations put polluting industries, refineries, landfills, incinerators, garbage dumps, anywhere where they know that they can put industry in regions where people are poor and have no political power and cannot fight them, cannot stop them from putting the industries in those neighborhoods. What happens? All of a sudden, the incidence of childhood asthma skyrocket. Then the next thing you know, adult cancer rates skyrocket. Then people start dropping dead. That's happening. That's been happening all over the country. But because that kind of stuff was happening to a lot of poor black and brown communities, everybody else didn't care because it wasn't happening to them. But see, now when the hurricane hits, the whole damn city floods, and the water doesn't care. The tide surge, it doesn't care what your zip code is.
Well, and then again, let's bring up Europe again. I mean, here you got the sun turning the French into French fries. Yeah, I know.
You are.
But you know, but again, Jackie, that's a good point. And it, as Americans, for the most part, we're optimistic people, and we just believe that in the end of the day, Bill Pullman or some other actor will, gather us all together, and and then bring the nations of the world together, and we would put our resources together and build a machine like in Geostorm, But that's not going to happen.
That is not. We can't even. We're not even going to spend money to fix some bridges.
Right.
How in the world we going?
Right. We'll come together and the brightest minds and stuff. But what's going to happen in reality is that humanity is going to, and I know you don't. I know a lot of us don't want to hear this. That don't mean we don't continue to fight, but this is what on the present trajectory. Now I'm out there every day as a truck driver, and America won't lead this. We got a president now who in the G7 conference, they were having a meeting about climate change, and he refused to go because he knows better than all the scientists. He doesn't believe it, and because he doesn't believe it, it doesn't exist. He doesn't agree with the data. This dumbass, you know what I mean? The fact that this dumbass is sitting up there talking about he doesn't agree with the seriously?
But he doesn't agree with the data, but he thinks that you can drop a nuclear bomb into a hurricane to keep it from hitting the United States.
This is where we are, and the reason why I said we can't expect any American leadership in this, because American leadership is too tied to the business culture and the business way of life. They have a super PAC out there that I was telling Jackie that I heard on NPR today that tells the candidates running for president that if you want any money from us, and I forget the name of this, we'll find it and share it with you guys. But it's a PAC that says that if you want any money from us, you have to sign a pledge that states that if you get elected, you cannot do anything about climate change that will cost money.
So I don't know how I don't know how you think Bill Pullman or anybody else is gonna come build a machine to do. Please.
So you're not gonna get any American leadership on this, and it's not just the leadership, the American population. Like I said, I'm out there driving the truck every day. DC area where we live at has the third worst traffic in the nation. We are the third worst traffic, have the third worst traffic in the nation outside of San Francisco and I think Los Angeles, right? Both on the West Coast. Our buses sit empty. I'm surrounded by buses that have hardly anybody in it, but everybody is in their goddamn car. You know what I mean? We are not willing to give up our lifestyle. they've been trying to get Americans out of their cars since the 70s. I remember the PSA commercials about carpooling and trying to gently educate Americans about carpool, use mass transportation, this and that, because they knew that this lifestyle that we have is unsustainable.
Right.
So they were trying to tell, well, at least as I remember, in the 70s, I was a kid, but I remember them commercials where they were saying, hey, pick up your neighbor, go to work. If y'all all work at the same place, carpool.
Right.
Less cars on the road. We said, fuck that.
Yep.
Because I don't like my neighbor. I don't like my neighbor. I can't stand my coworkers. I damn sure don't want to drive to and from work with them. I like my solitude. And because in this country, rugged individualism is so much nurtured here, so we want to sit in traffic. Is the way we've been socialized. We've been socialized to be consumers. And so as consumers, you can't get us to think. See, if we all thought as a community, then we wouldn't have, look, if everybody carpool, that's less cars we're going to buy. So we can't, so big business can't have that.
Right.
If all of us was to share our resources, then that's less consumerism that we're going to be about. So the thing of it is to keep us buying, keep us spending, keep us consumers. So the planet be damned.
Yep.
Species be damned.
Yep.
The climate be damned. Fuck it. I'm in my car, and look. I mean, look at all the nice gadgets that I got in my car. I ain't even got to drive it; it drives itself.
Exactly.
Right, but you know what? Out of all of those things, and we bring this up to say that maybe what's coming for us, we deserve.
Maybe. Sandy's been typing a few comments in the that there's still the thinking that we are going to destroy the earth. We think we're that important. We're not. We're really, really not. The earth has been here for millennia and has weathered. Think about it. The earth has weathered direct hits from comets that have destroyed entire species. All life that existed on Earth was destroyed by a comet, a few of them, meteors that directly impacted the Earth. Earth's still here. Those species weren't. So there's still
But I want to give you a more recent example.
Okay.
The more recent example is that during the 70s, we were destroying the ozone layer by aerosols, sprays, and all this other kind of stuff. And there was this big push to ban FCs, BPAs, and all this stuff, and the refrigerants and all this stuff.
Right.
And I remember this large hole that NASA showed us. In the ozone, and this was caused by human activity. We banned those things, and the ozone layer came back together.
Healed it. Yeah.
It healed itself.
Yeah,
so now we don't have that hole in there anymore.
We stopped doing damaging things, and then the earth was able to heal itself.
I give you another example. Anacostia River, right where we live at now, was one of the most polluted rivers in the country. So much so that people say that you could smell DC before you went there.
You kind of could.
Right? Because of the Anacostia. There was a swimming ban in the Anacostia. Now, because of humans stopped doing what they're doing and dumping sewage and stuff in the Anacostia, they're getting ready to lift the swimming ban. The wildlife has returned.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? The river is a lot cleaner now, so much cleaner that they're getting ready to lift the swim ban that they had for decades in the Anacostia. So the earth is a lot tougher than we think. We just talked about Chernobyl. The plants adapted to the radiation.
Right.
So so we're not killing the earth. We're killing ourselves. What's happening is just like any germ, any virus, the heat. I said this morning. When our bodies are and we're all mini planets. I mean, all we got to do is take a piece of our skin, put it under electron microscope, and you got plenty of species that's living on you. You know what I mean? That you can't get rid of. So we are ourselves a walking planet. We have an ecosystem within our bodies that's on us. So we're so we're all connected. So the thing of it is, when something comes inside us that doesn't belong there, or that doesn't want to cooperate, or that want to cause havoc, the first thing our bodies do is turn up the heat.
Yep.
So it turns up the heat to kill it.
to burn the
right. It turns
disease
up the
out.
heat to kill it, and that's one of the first. That's why we get fevers and all this stuff, because the heat of the body's first response is, let's kill this motherfucker. Let's turn the heat up. And then that we got other stuff, but we are becoming the germ, and we are becoming that virus, and we are being responded to by a living organism, which is the earth, that's saying, look, we got to get rid of this stuff. Now we know also, and I know that my explanation is pretty simplistic for all of you biologists out there. I know I'm going to hear it, but the thing of it is that we as human beings, unlike other species, we could decide. We could be the good bacteria because we have that inside our own body. We could be the good bacteria that helps the body along and does stuff to help the body live and stuff. You know, it's bacteria. Or we could be the fucked up bacteria that sits around here and just want to cause havoc. So we as human beings, we have the choice to be that. So we decide to be the messed up bacteria, then guess what? Actions have consequences.
Right.
And this is where we talk about justice. Justice only means that ignorance of the law is no excuse. The universe is governed by laws. Set laws. It's governed by laws. And so what happens is that just because we're here, that don't mean that we could violate these set laws and think that we're going to get away with it. We are created to live here on the earth. There's a reason why we have to have a bunch of shit to follow us when we go outside the atmosphere, because we're not meant to live up there.
Right.
The laws the universal laws won't allow us to live anywhere else but here unless we are accompanied by by our own life support system. And that life support system has to mirror where we're at, because this is where we belong. So unless we take that life support system that would sustain our life somewhere else, we can't leave. So this is the thing. So we have to understand that we are subjected to the same universal natural laws as everything else. And because we have decided not to do that, then there's consequences. And justice is this is justice. You violate the law, you get punished. Punish may even mean that you get the death sentence. And so what we're facing now, because we're violating the universal natural laws, we are possibly facing a death sentence.
Right.
And so that is justice. Justice doesn't care where you live, doesn't care where you're from, how much money you got. No, we made those distinctions amongst ourselves.
Right.
But the natural and universal laws don't have such distinctions, and it might be time that we should start accepting that, and not just sit and turn on classic rock and turn up the air conditioning because we've been having a heat wave for the last 6 months, and keep the air conditioning turned up and be like, I hate my neighbor, I hate my coworkers, I'm not sharing anything with them, and you know, we may be facing but the universe may be passing its death sentence on us. And the only problem of it is that we're sitting on death row, and we don't know when they're going to snatch us out that cell, give us our last meal, whether it's plants or meat, and decide that, hey, you guys had a great run, but you know, somebody, you know, we got something else got to take over.
And you know, the thing is, the sobering, if that's not sobering enough, the really sobering thing is that we've been on probation for a while. I mean, the universe, or God, or Allah, or whatever you want to call the universe, or the creator.
Michelle Obama. Some of y'all.
Yeah.
Michelle Obama can save us.
You know, whatever you want to call, whatever it is you believe created the earth and everything in it, and everything on it, has given us, they've had us on probation for a minute, telling us, look, get your stuff right, get your stuff right, get your stuff right. These are the rules. Don't break these rules or else you're going to death row. These are the rules. And we kept ignoring. Like we said earlier, the idea that human beings are the center of all things in the universe is a very new concept in the history of creation. And that was a concept that was, oddly enough, created by human beings. I mean, because when we look at our faith traditions, yes, we are precious to whatever creator that created us in whatever our faith tradition is, but we were not the first thing our creator created. And we were not put here to be the most important thing. in every spiritual tradition, whether it's Christianity, whether it is Judaism, whether it is Islam, or whether it is indigenous spiritual beliefs, mankind was put on earth to be the caretaker of the earth. We were not put here to own this stuff. We weren't put here to run this. That's not what we were put here for. The earth was not put here for us. We were put here to care for the earth. And the idea that, especially among Christians, this is especially offensive to me as a Christian, but especially among Christians who are using this dominion theology, where they believe that it is the Bible that gives them the right to rule over everything of the earth. Like he said about the scriptures in Job, that can't possibly be true. When God was asking Job, bro, where were you when I created the heavens and the earth? How you gonna ask me why I didn't do, or where have I been? Where you been? You didn't make this, I made this. So in every faith tradition, the idea is not that mankind owns anything on this earth, that we have a right to do with it whatever we choose. That's not spiritual in anybody's spirituality, except for the spirituality of capitalism and white supremacy, which we told you a couple weeks ago, white supremacy is a religion.
It's the most dominant religion on the planet, and that's the thing. We spoke about that in the last show. That white supremacy is the most dominant religion on the planet, because anywhere the white supremacists go, if they want to take over, they do. And we're going to talk about, because we're coming to an end. But the next show we're going to talk about why the white supremacists why their quest to subdue Iran is the last piece of the puzzle for their world domination.
Wow.
And we're going to talk about